The rain had stopped only minutes earlier, but the dirt road leading into the makeshift British camp was still wet enough that every step made a muted sucking sound. The sky hung low and gray, as if exhausted by the long years of war, just like everyone else in the world, it seemed. Corporal Samuel Whitaker adjusted the strap of his rifle and blew warm breath against his cold hands. His shift guarding the newly arrived POW convoy should have been routine, but after 6 years of conflict, routine was a word he no longer trusted. The line of German prisoners shuffled forward under the watch of half a dozen British soldiers. Most of them were young, too young. The war had emptied nations of their men, and by the end it was scraping the bottom of its own humanity. Samuel had seen enough fear in their eyes to last a lifetime. But among the dozens of defeated soldiers, one figure made him blink twice, thinking at first that she was an illusion. A girl no older than 18 stood with her hands raised above her head, her fingers trembling, her blonde hair drenched and plastered against her face. She wore a filthy Wehrmacht overcoat several sizes too big, its sleeves swallowing her arms. Her shoulders curved inward, not in defiance, but in self-protection, and her eyes, blue and wide, darted with the frantic energy of a trapped bird. Samuel wasn't the only one who noticed. Private Collins muttered under his breath, "Bloody hell! They're sending us girls now." Sergeant Fox, older, meaner, and perpetually irritated, spat into the mud. Orders said all surrendering personnel. Doesn't matter the age. They serve the Reich, they queue with the rest. Samuel suppressed the urge to speak. He didn't trust Fox to understand anything beyond the chain of command. The line halted. The prisoners were told to lower their hands and kneel. Most obeyed quickly, but the girl hesitated. When she finally moved, her knee buckled, and she nearly fell face first into the mud. Fox barked, "On your knees, Fraulein." "You're no exception." She scrambled down mud, splashing up onto her pale cheeks. Something twisted in Samuel's chest. She looked like someone who had never been meant for war, someone who should have been learning to dance or laughing with friends, not freezing in a POW camp surrounded by strangers she'd been told were monsters. Fox shoved a clipboard at Samuel. "Whitaker, process her. Check her papers if she has any. If she resists, well, you know what to do." Samuel nodded, though he hated the implication. He approached the girl slowly, carefully, as if any sudden movement might shatter her. When he crouched beside her, she flinched violently, her breath catching in her throat, like she expected to be struck. "Hey," he said quietly. "Easy." She didn't look up at first. Her eyes were focused on the mud. He could tell she understood English, or at least enough to survive. "I'm not here to hurt you," Samuel continued, offering the softest voice he had used in months. "Do you have identification papers?" Her lips parted, but only a rasp came out. She swallowed hard, then reached into her oversized coat with shaking fingers. She pulled out a worn booklet, her military pass barely held together by frayed edges. Samuel took it gently. Her name was printed in smudged ink, Clara Weiss, Auxiliary Radio, Assistant Auxiliary. Not even combat. "That coat's not yours, is it?" Samuel asked softly. She shook her head. "Whose was it?" She hesitated, then whispered, "My brother's." Her voice was thin, trembling, barely there. Samuel's heartbeat stumbled. Many POWs lied to gain sympathy, but there was no lie in her voice, just a rawness that war carved into the innocent. Before he could say anything more, Fox marched over, boots splashing. "Well, is she trouble?" "No, sir," Samuel said quickly. "She's just scared." Fox snorted. "Scared!" He leaned down, his shadow engulfing her. "You should have thought of that before wearing that coat, sweetheart. Makes you look like a soldier. Soldiers get treated like soldiers." Clara's shoulders rose instinctively, like she was dodging invisible blows. Fox was enjoying this. Samuel hated men like him, men who needed someone weaker to feel strong. Fox nudged her chin up with 2 fingers, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you." Her breath hitched. She choked out, "Bitte nicht. Please, don't humiliate me." The phrase hit Samuel like a slap. The desperation in her voice wasn't fear of punishment, it was fear of being degraded, fear of being made a spectacle. Fox smirked. "Humiliate you? Haven't even started. Before Fox could take another step, Samuel's hand shot out, grabbing the sergeant's wrist, not hard, but firmly enough to draw a startled look. Sergeant Samuel said through clenched teeth, "Captain Reed requested minimal force during intake. She's an auxiliary, not a combatant. If you want trouble from command, this is a good way to get it." Fox narrowed his eyes. "Since when do you tell me procedure, Corporal, since I'd rather not write a report about unnecessary force on a minor POW?" Fox's glare sharpened, but Samuel didn't back down. Rank only went so far. Reputation did the rest. And Samuel had the advantage of being known for keeping paperwork clean and incidents quieter. Finally, Fox pulled his arm back with a scoff. "Fine. She's your responsibility, Whitaker. But don't get soft. They're all the same." He stalked off. Only when Fox was out of earshot did Samuel kneel again, lowering himself to Clara's eye level. Her breaths were shallow and rapid, her whole body trembling. "You're safe," he said quietly. "I won't let him touch you." She blinked, tears trembling at the edges of her lashes, but refusing to fall. Her voice emerged like crushed glass. "Why, I am your enemy." Samuel exhaled slowly. "The war's over. My enemy is whatever kept it going this long." She didn't understand, not fully, but she sensed the truth in his tone. He offered her his hand to help her stand. She stared at it, torn between fear and disbelief. For a long, fragile moment she didn't move. Then, with the slightest hesitation, she placed her cold, muddied fingers into his palm. Samuel lifted her gently, making sure she stayed steady. Behind them, Collins whistled under his breath. "Careful, Whitaker. You'll ruin your reputation." Samuel shot him a look that shut him up fast. Clara swayed slightly on her feet. Samuel adjusted his hold so she wouldn't fall. "We'll get you someplace warm. The intake tent has blankets." She swallowed hard, searching his face for mockery or hidden cruelty. She found none, and for the first time since she had stepped into the camp, her trembling eased just a little. Samuel guided her toward the tent. The ground squelched beneath their boots, but she didn't stumble again. He kept his pace slow, reassuring. "Please," she murmured once more, so faint he barely caught it. "Don't humiliate me." He paused, turning to face her. "I won't," he said simply. Those two words struck her like something foreign, something she had forgotten existed. Kindness. And neither of them knew it yet, but his next decision, the one he hadn't even made, would be the act that shocked her more than anything that had happened in the war. The intake tent was warmer than the outside air, but only barely. A pair of lanterns swayed from a rope overhead, their light flickering across rows of blankets, crates, and medical supplies. The damp canvas walls flapped in the wind, carrying the smell of wet soil and burnt diesel. Samuel pushed the flap aside and guided Clara inside. She stiffened immediately, her shoulders tensing as her eyes darted to the soldiers sorting files, weapons, and personal effects. Each clang of metal made her flinch. Each raised voice made her shrink. Samuel noticed it all. He stopped near an empty cot and gestured toward it gently. "Sit. Just sit for a moment." Clara obeyed, lowering herself onto the cot, as though expecting it to collapse beneath her. The oversized Wehrmacht coat pooled around her like a deflated parachute. She looked impossibly small inside it. Samuel fetched a wool blanket from a nearby crate. When he draped it across her shoulders, she jerked back instinctively, then froze, realizing he wasn't doing anything else. Her wide eyes flickered to his face, confused. "You're freezing," he said simply. "Wrap that tight." Her fingers trembled as she pulled the blanket closer. A British medic approached, wiping grease from his hands. "New intake auxiliary," Samuel said. "Seems dehydrated." The medic nodded and walked away to fetch water and rations. Clara watched him go, then whispered, You treat prisoners kindly." Samuel almost gave a bitter laugh. "Some of us try." She tilted her head in a small, hesitant motion. "Not always, no." Her gaze lowered to her hands. "I know what armies do to prisoners. Germans, too." Samuel didn't contradict her. He couldn't. He had seen things on every side that could make a man lose faith in his own species. Instead, he crouched beside her again. "Tell me something. When you said earlier, 'Please don't humiliate me,' what did you think we were going to do?" Clara swallowed. Her voice cracked. "Make example. For others." She hesitated, then forced the rest out. "Strip me. Cut my hair. Parade me." Samuel inhaled sharply. "We don't do that." She didn't seem convinced. Fear had carved deep lines into her understanding of the world. Kindness didn't erase those overnight. The medic returned with a tin cup of water and a small packet of biscuits. Clara hesitated before taking them, as if expecting a trick. Samuel gestured encouragingly. "It's safe. Eat." She sipped first tiny, cautious sips, then drank more deeply. The water steadied her breathing. She nibbled a biscuit, chewing slowly, like someone who hadn't had a proper meal in days. When she was done, she whispered something so quietly he almost missed it. "Danke." Samuel nodded. "You're welcome." A few minutes passed in silence, broken only by the soft patter of wind against canvas. Then Sergeant Fox's voice exploded outside the tent, ordering men to reorganize the POW lines. Clara stiffened. Samuel stood and walked to the tent's opening, lifting the flap just enough to see Fox's silhouette moving across the yard. The sergeant was in a foul mood, shouting at one group of prisoners, kicking a bucket at another. A man like that would circle back eventually, like a vulture returning to whatever stirred beneath his shadow, and Clara was the easiest prey. Samuel let the flap fall closed. When he turned back, Clara was hunched over the blanket, gripping its edges as though preparing to be torn away from it. "You don't have to be afraid of him," Samuel said. She shook her head. "I am afraid of all soldiers." Samuel paused. "Even me." She hesitated. The kind of hesitation that came from conflicting truths, the world she had known and the world she was seeing now. Finally she whispered, "Less." It was the smallest word, and yet it carried more weight than a confession. Samuel rubbed the back of his neck. "Listen, Clara. Intake protocol says we separate prisoners by role combatants and non-combatants. Most auxiliaries get sent to the north enclosure. It's safer. But Fox, he might override that. He doesn't like variables." She stared at him blankly. "Variables? People who don't fit the mold he expects. Makes him unpredictable." Clara's face paled even further. Samuel looked at the coat she was still wearing. Bloodstains dried into the fabric told a story she hadn't yet shared. He nodded toward it gently. "Was your brother with you when you surrendered?" She flinched, not from the question but from the memory it dragged forward. "No," she whispered. "He died 2 weeks ago near Hanover. Artillery." She paused. I took his coat so I would not feel alone." Samuel pulled up a small metal stool and sat. "You too close." Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. She blinked hard, but one escaped, tracing a line through the dirt on her cheek. "He was everything," she whispered. "He told me, if war ends while we still live, we will find Father's old cabin in the Alps. Start again." Samuel's heart tightened. "What happened to your parents' mother illness long time ago? Father, conscripted. No word since 1943. Samuel closed his eyes briefly. Loss was a language both sides spoke fluently. Outside, Fox barked orders again. Clara shuddered violently at the sound. Samuel exhaled. "Right. I'm not letting him near you again." Clara looked up sharply. "You cannot stop your superior officer." Samuel stood. "Watch me." He crossed the tent to a storage crate and rummaged through uniforms and spare coats. After a moment he pulled out a folded British field jacket, clean, warm brown wool. He returned to Clara. Her eyes widened. "No, I cannot wear British uniform." "You're not wearing it as a uniform," Samuel said. "You're wearing it so Fox stops seeing you as a Wehrmacht soldier." Clara clutched her brother's coat. "But this is all I have left of him." Samuel softened. "Then keep it. But not on you, not right now." She looked at the British jacket, then at Samuel, uncertainty trembling across her face. A German auxiliary wearing British issue such a thing felt impossible in her mind. He set the jacket beside her. "This is your choice. No one will force you." She stared at it for a long moment. Then with shaky fingers, she slid her arms out of the gray German coat. She folded it almost reverently and set it on her lap. Her thin blouse beneath was damp and offered little warmth. She shivered. Samuel gently held up the British jacket. "Here, let me help." She lifted her arms slowly. He eased the jacket around her shoulders. It was large but not engulfing. Warmth seeped into her immediately. Clara's breath caught not from fear but shock. You give enemy your clothes." Samuel met her eyes. "You're not my enemy." Her chest rose sharply with a quiet, fractured breath, but Samuel wasn't finished. He walked to the far side of the tent, grabbed a charcoal stub, and returned with a clipboard. He scribbled her intake classification auxiliary noncombatant, then added a note in bold lettering. "Reassigned to North Enclosure under Corporal Whitaker's direct watch. No interrogation without medical clearance. Priority. Minimal contact with General POW lines." Clara frowned slightly, not understanding the English fully. "What? What is that?" Samuel looked up. "This," he said quietly, "is the next move." She blinked. "Next? Move." Samuel sat beside her again. "You asked me not to humiliate you. And I won't. This keeps Fox from touching you. It keeps anyone from using you as an example. It puts you under my responsibility, someone who actually gives a damn." For a moment Clara couldn't speak. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her breath shook. "You shocked me," she whispered. "British soldier, helping a German girl." Samuel's voice remained steady. "I'm helping a human being." She bowed her head, and for the first time her tears fell freely. Outside, Fox's voice rose again, but Clara didn't flinch this time, because Samuel had placed himself between her and the world, and neither of them yet understood how deeply that decision would redefine both of their lives as the post-war days unfolded. The North Enclosure rested at the far end of the camp, separated from the main prisoner lines by 2 layers of fencing and a narrow path used by supply carts. Compared to the central yard, crowded, noisy, and constantly under Fox's boot, the north side was almost serene. The prisoners there were mostly clerks, radio operators, cooks, and medical staff people who had supported the German war machine but had not wielded rifles themselves. They posed no real threat, and the British guards rotated through the sector with far less tension. Samuel led Clara along the gravel path just after dusk. The lantern he carried cast a warm halo of light around them. She walked quietly beside him, her arms wrapped tightly around the British field jacket he had given her. Though she tried to hide it, she glanced over her shoulder every few steps, expecting Fox or someone worse to emerge from the shadows. Samuel noticed. "You're safe here," he said gently. "No one follows prisoners to this enclosure after evening roll call." Clara nodded but didn't relax. When they reached the gate, Corporal Harlan, broad-shouldered, a bit slow in speech but kind enough, saluted lazily. "Evening, Whitaker." "New intake?" he asked, eyeing Clara with curiosity but not suspicion. "Auxiliary radio operator. Non-combatant." Samuel replied. "I filed the paperwork already." Harlan scratched his beard. "All right then, I'll slaughter into the women's quarters. They're nearly full, but there's space for one more." Samuel hesitated. Clara's fingers tightened around her jacket sleeves. Harlan caught the exchange and raised an eyebrow. "Is something wrong?" Samuel glanced at Clara, then shook his head. "No, just making sure she won't be assigned anywhere near the communal punishments." Harlan snorted. "That's Fox's thing, not ours. She'll be fine up here." Satisfied, Samuel nodded. Harlan unlocked the gate and motioned Clara through. She took one slow step forward, then paused and looked back at Samuel. Her voice was barely audible. You stay." "Until you're settled," Samuel said. Harlan raised an amused brow. "Since when do you escort them like this?" "Since today," Samuel answered, tone flat. Harlan didn't press further. Inside the enclosure, lanterns flickered from small wooden posts. A handful of female auxiliaries sat around a barrel fire, warming their hands and speaking in quiet German. They noticed Clara, some with sympathy, others with suspicion. Women in war trusted slowly. Clara shrank under their gaze, inching closer to Samuel's side. He spoke softly. "You'll be all right here. These are civilians in uniform just like you." She didn't move. After a moment, Samuel addressed the nearest woman, a middle-aged nurse with tired eyes. "Ma'am," he said politely, "could you help her get settled, just until she finds her bearings?" The nurse studied Clara's trembling form, then nodded with a sigh. "Komm, kleines Fräulein. You look like you have not slept in days." Clara didn't follow immediately. Instead, she turned toward Samuel. She didn't speak, but her eyes did. Fear, gratitude, uncertainty, 100 unsaid things. Samuel gave a reassuring nod. "I'll check on you tomorrow, early." Only then did Clara step toward the nurse. Harland locked the gate behind her. "You've got a soft heart, Whitaker," he muttered. "Dangerous thing in a war." Samuel didn't answer. He watched until Clara disappeared inside a small barracks hut, her silhouette framed briefly by lantern light before vanishing entirely. Only then did he turn away. Samuel barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Clara kneeling in the mud under Fox's shadow, whispering, "Please, don't humiliate me." Her voice lived in the back of his mind, fragile enough to break him, but strong enough to haunt him. By morning, he had decided to check on her before Fox began his rounds. With luck, the sergeant wouldn't care enough to question why Samuel was reassigned to early duty in the North Enclosure. When Samuel reached the gate, Harland greeted him with a yawn. "Bright and early. She's awake, I think. Been up since dawn." Samuel stepped inside. He found Clara sitting outside the barracks, her hands wrapped around a tin cup of weak tea. Her hair was cleaner, braided loosely down her back. Someone had lent her a small comb. Her appearance already seemed less haunted than the night before. Yet when she saw Samuel, her breath caught, as if she hadn't been sure he would really come. "You said early," she murmured. "And I meant it," Samuel replied. She gave the faintest nod. He sat across from her on a wooden crate. "How was the night?" Her fingers tightened around the cup. "Quiet. Warm. They gave me bed by window." "That's good." She hesitated. "But I had dreams. Of yesterday." Samuel understood. "Your brother." Her voice cracked. "And the mud. The shouting. I woke many times." He leaned forward slightly. "If you ever need anything, food blankets, even just someone to talk to, ask Harland. Or me." She blinked slowly as if trying to decide whether she deserved such an offer. "Why do you help me?" she asked. Samuel exhaled. "Because not helping would feel like losing a part of myself I'm trying hard to keep." She didn't understand the full meaning, but she sensed its truth. They sat together quietly for a while, interrupted only by the distant rumble of trucks near the central yard. Eventually, Clara asked Will Fox come here?" "No," Samuel answered firmly. "He rarely steps foot in this enclosure. Too boring for him." Clara's body eased slightly, but tension still clung to her like a shadow. Samuel watched her trace circles on the rim of her cup. Her hands were delicate, not made for war. He imagined her in a schoolroom scribbling notes, in a bakery kneading dough, anywhere but a uniform. After a moment she whispered, "You are different from other soldiers." He smiled faintly. "Some would say I'm not soldier enough." She shook her head. "No, you have softness." She frowned, searching for the right English word. "Not weakness, kindness. I forgot that exists." Her honesty struck him deeper than she knew. He changed the subject gently. "If you're up to it, you can help with small tasks here, sorting rations, folding laundry, nothing strenuous. It might help the days feel shorter." Her eyes shone with sudden relief. Purpose was a lifeline. I want to help. I want to not feel useless." "You're not useless," he said immediately. She looked down as if unsure how to accept kindness without flinching. For the next 5 days, Clara settled gradually into the rhythm of the North Enclosure. She worked quietly among the other auxiliaries, sorting clothing, writing small inventory lists, and assisting the camp nurse with basic tasks. She moved carefully, always aware of her surroundings, always ready for orders. And every morning Samuel checked on her. Sometimes they spoke for only a minute or two, sometimes longer. Their conversations deepened slowly, like a guarded truce becoming something gentler. Clara told him about her childhood near the Bavarian foothills, where she and her brother built wooden rafts and let the river carry them. Samuel told her about his mother's bakery in Manchester and the secret recipe for lemon shortbread she'd sworn to take to the grave. They laughed once quietly but genuinely at the idea of sharing recipes after a war that had taken nearly everything. But the world outside the enclosure did not care for small peace. On the 6th morning, Samuel arrived to find Harland frowning. "What's wrong?" Samuel asked. Harland held up a clipboard. Fox flagged the new prisoner logs. "He's demanding an inspection of all German auxiliaries this afternoon." Samuel's stomach tightened. Inspection. For what reason? He says some auxiliaries might be masquerading as harmless. Claims we're getting lax. Samuel clenched his jaw. He's looking for an excuse. Harlan nodded grimly. You'd best be here when he arrives. I will be. Clara was folding blankets when Samuel approached. She looked up at once, sensing the shift in his expression. What happened? She asked. Fox is coming to inspect the enclosure today. Her lips parted in fear. Here, yes. He lowered his voice. But listen to me. He won't harm you. He won't embarrass you. I'll be here the entire time. She swallowed hard. He hates weakness. I saw in his eyes. Samuel nodded. He hates what he can control. Clara whispered, and I am easy to control. Samuel stepped closer, his voice steady as stone. Not while I'm here. Her breath trembled, but she believed him. By late afternoon, Fox entered the enclosure with 2 soldiers at his side. He prowled through the rows of auxiliaries like a predator examining livestock. Clara stood near the back, Samuel beside her. Fox's gaze eventually landed on her. He smirked. Well, well. Little Fraulein in British brown now. How adorable. Clara stiffened. Samuel stepped forward, half a pace, subtle but unmistakable. All auxiliaries are compliant and assigned to appropriate duties, sir. Fox ignored him. He stepped closer to Clara, his boots crunching on gravel. What's your name again? He asked mockingly. She swallowed. Clara. Clara, Fox repeated as if tasting it. Tell me, Clara, did Whitaker give you that fancy jacket? Looks better on you than gray, I'll admit. Before she could respond, Samuel said sharply, Sir, she has clearance. Fox cut him off. I didn't ask you, Corporal. He took another step toward Clara. She whispered, barely audible, Please. Samuel moved fully between them. Fox's expression darkened. Careful, Whitaker. You're awfully protective of this one. She's under my watch, by Command's orders. Fox scoffed. Command doesn't care what happens to a captured radio girl. I do. The enclosure fell silent. Fox stared between them, measuring, calculating. Something unspoken passed across his face. And for a terrifying moment, Samuel thought Fox might retaliate. But then slowly, with a sneer, Fox stepped back. Fine. Keep your pet safe if you're so determined. His voice dropped to a threat. But remember, once she leaves this camp, she's not your responsibility anymore. With that, Fox barked new orders and left the enclosure. Clara exhaled shakily, her knees weakening. Samuel steadied her with a hand on her arm. Are you all right? He asked. She nodded, though her breath trembled. You stood between us. Of course I did. Her voice broke. Why, Samuel looked at her not as a British soldier guarding a German POW, not as 2 sides of a broken continent, but as 2 human beings standing in the fragile space between harm and healing. Because mercy, he said quietly, is a weight I'm willing to carry. Her eyes shimmered, not with fear this time, but with something far more dangerous. Hope. Clara's release came sooner than anyone expected. The war was over and the British command had begun processing non-combatant auxiliaries for repatriation. Papers were stamped, signatures exchanged, and long columns of former enemies prepared to return to a home that barely existed anymore. When Samuel found out Clara was on the release list, his first reaction was relief, followed instantly by something heavier, something he wasn't ready to name. He found her near the women's hut, folding her few belongings. The British jacket he had given her, the comb she'd borrowed, and her brother's coat carefully preserved, cleaned and folded as though it were still holding him. She looked up as he approached. It is time, she whispered. He nodded. Harlan told me. Your transport leaves this afternoon. Clara gripped the coat tighter. Will you walk with me to the gate? Of course. The march to freedom was quiet. Prisoners spoke in hushed tones, as if afraid the world outside might disappear if they were too loud. The sun had just begun sinking, casting a warm glow across the yard. As they approached the camp's front gate, Clara slowed. Samuel, she said, her voice fragile, when I first came here. I thought I would be hurt, or worse. I know, he said gently. You could have ignored me. Many did. I didn't want to be like them. She bowed her head, brushing a thumb over the British jacket draped over her arm. Your kindness. It felt like something impossible, something forbidden. Samuel swallowed. It shouldn't be. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The gate loomed ahead, the official divide between captivity and uncertain freedom. Then Clara reached into the British jacket's pocket and pulled out a small scrap of paper folded many times over. She placed it in his hand. "I wrote something," she said. "For you." He carefully unfolded it. Her handwriting, uneven but earnest, filled the page. "Kindness is the first freedom I learned again. You gave it back to me." Samuel felt emotion surge in his chest so suddenly he almost stepped back. "Clara," but she shook her head. "Let me say this before courage leaves me." He waited. "When Fox came near me, when I begged you not to humiliate me, I thought the world had no mercy left. But your next move, standing between us—" Her voice cracked softly. "It shocked me. It changed something inside me. Maybe more than you know." Samuel's breath tightened. "If I could undo all the hurt you've known, I would." She gave a trembling smile. "You undid enough." Behind them, an officer shouted for the transport line to move. Clara turned toward the gate. But then, unexpectedly, she stepped closer to Samuel. "May I ask you something?" she whispered. "Anything. Does mercy stay after war?" Samuel looked into her eyes, blue cautious but no longer hollow. "Yes," he said, "if we choose to carry it." Clara's breath shivered. She reached out, and for the first time since she had arrived at the camp, she closed the distance willingly. Her hand brushed his, just barely. A question, a thank you, a quiet promise of remembrance. Samuel closed his fingers gently around hers, returning the gesture with the same fragile honesty she offered. No soldier watching would have understood it. No officer would have approved it, but no law of war forbade humanity. Clara released his hand slowly. She stepped back, lifting her brother's coat in her arms, and she smiled, small, hesitant, but real. "Goodbye, Samuel," he swallowed. "Goodbye, Clara. Take care. And start again like your brother wanted." She nodded, tears shimmering in the corners of her eyes. "I think I can." With that, she turned and walked through the gate, following the line of former prisoners toward their unknown future. Samuel stood at the threshold long after she was gone, the scrap of paper still warm in his hand. War had taken many things from him, but in the fading light of that evening, he realized something extraordinary. He had saved one thing, the part of himself that believed in mercy. And somewhere beyond the horizon, a German girl carried that same fragile hope back into a broken world.